The sun hung high in the sky, illuminating a bustling downtown area filled with the vibrant sounds of chatter, laughter, and the clinking of coffee cups. Marcus Johnson, a decorated Army general on a rare day off, strolled leisurely along the sidewalk, taking in the sights and sounds that were so often lost to him during his deployments. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms defined by years of discipline and dedication. His dark skin glistened under the sun, a testament to the warmth of the day. As he approached a quaint cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, drawing him in like a moth to a flame. The cafe was a favorite of locals, its outdoor seating filled with patrons engaged in animated conversations. Marcus spotted an empty table in the corner, nestled under a large umbrella. He settled down, pulling out his phone to catch up on some messages from his men. "You're lucky to have a day off," came a cheerful voice. It was Lisa, a friend he had served with in the army. She had a warm smile that could brighten even the darkest of days. "I thought you'd be stuck in some briefing room. If you're enjoying this video and want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and activate the bell. That way, you won't miss any of our updates. Your support helps us bring you the best content possible." Continuing, "Yeah, well, I needed a break from all that. Just wanted to enjoy some normalcy for a change," Marcus replied, his voice calm yet tinged with the weight of recent experiences. They exchanged pleasantries, reminiscing about their time in the service, the camaraderie, and the sacrifices made. "So, how's your family doing?" Lisa asked, taking a sip from her iced coffee. "They're good. Just glad to have me home," he said, his smile fading slightly. "But you know how it is, with everything going on." Before he could finish, a loud shout pierced the air. A group of protesters marched by, holding signs demanding justice and accountability from the police. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the recent protests igniting a turbulent undercurrent in the community. Marcus watched them go by, a mixture of admiration and concern swirling within him. He understood the fight for justice, yet he also knew the dangers that came with it. Across town, Officer Tom McCarthy sat in his precinct, a hardened cop with years of experience steeped in a troubling history of racial profiling. His desk was cluttered with papers and a half-eaten donut, remnants of a long shift. A call crackled through his radio, drawing his attention. "Unit 43, report of a suspicious individual loitering near the cafe on Main Street," came the dispatcher's voice, laced with urgency. McCarthy's heart raced. Suspicious individuals were his specialty. "Copy that," he replied, already standing and adjusting his belt. He grabbed his badge and cap, his mind racing with the possibilities. The reports of loitering often meant trouble, and he felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through him. As he raced through the streets, he couldn't shake the biases that colored his perspective. His mind raced with images and stereotypes, unyielding in their grip. He was determined to assert his authority, to enforce the law whatever it took. Back at the cafe, Marcus and Lisa were deep in conversation, laughter spilling from their lips as they shared stories that only old friends could cherish. The moment felt innocent, a brief respite from the world outside. But that tranquility shattered when McCarthy arrived, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of trouble. "Hey, you!" McCarthy shouted, striding purposefully toward Marcus, his badge glinting in the sunlight. Marcus turned, confusion etched on his face. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I'm talking to you," McCarthy barked, his voice loud and commanding. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be loitering around this neighborhood." "Loitering?" Marcus echoed, disbelief creeping into his tone. "I'm just having coffee with a friend. I'm an Army general on leave." "Sure you are," McCarthy scoffed, taking a step closer, his body tense with aggression. "You fit the description of a suspect we've been looking for. You're not fooling anyone." Lisa watched, her heart racing as she sensed the situation escalating. "Officer, he's not a suspect. He's a decorated officer. You can check his ID," she interjected, her voice steady but laced with concern. McCarthy ignored her, his focus solely on Marcus. "You need to step away from the table," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "I'm placing you under arrest." "What? You can't be serious," Marcus protested, standing up, disbelief etched into his features. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just enjoying my day off." "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," McCarthy commanded, his voice lowering ominously. "I'm not resisting, but you have no right to do this," Marcus replied, his calm demeanor beginning to crack under the weight of the absurdity of the situation. "Yeah, we'll see about that," McCarthy retorted, stepping forward with the intent to cuff Marcus. The cafe patrons began to stir, whispers and gasps filling the air as they witnessed the confrontation. Some reached for their phones, unsure if they should intervene or document the incident. Lisa's heart raced. She quickly grabbed her phone, instinctively hitting the record button. "Hey, back off," she shouted, stepping in front of Marcus. "You're making a huge mistake." But McCarthy wasn't deterred. He forcefully grabbed Marcus's arm, yanking it behind his back. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest and loitering. You can tell it to the judge." Marcus winced but maintained his composure. "This is a mistake," he insisted, his voice steady. "You're making a huge mistake. Get in the car," McCarthy barked, shoving him toward the police cruiser parked nearby. The spectacle drew even more attention, with bystanders now gathering, phones raised to capture the unfolding drama. Marcus felt a wave of humiliation wash over him, but deeper than that was a burning anger. How was this happening? He had faced enemies in combat, but this felt like a betrayal from within his own community. As McCarthy pushed him into the back seat, the weight of the situation settled heavily upon him. He glanced out of the window, catching sight of Lisa, her expression a mix of disbelief and determination. She was shaking her head, her phone still recording. "Someone needs to do something," she exclaimed, her voice rising above the murmurs of the crowd. But Marcus knew that it wouldn't just be a matter of someone taking action. This was about more than just him. It was a fight against a system that had failed so many before him. As the cruiser pulled away, he steeled himself for what lay ahead, knowing that this was only the beginning of a battle for justice, one that would challenge everything he believed in and everything he had fought for. Marcus Johnson sat in the dimly lit holding cell of the police station, the sounds of laughter and chatter from the outside world creating a stark contrast to his grim reality. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering intermittently, casting a cold, unwelcoming glow on the gray concrete walls. He could hear the muffled voices of officers discussing their day, a mix of casual banter and self-congratulatory remarks that made his stomach churn. "Another day, another criminal off the streets," he heard one officer say, his voice dripping with arrogance. Marcus clenched his fists, frustration boiling within him. He had spent years serving his country, protecting freedoms that seemed to be stripped away from him in an instant. He tried to reach for his phone, the one possession that could connect him to the outside world, but it was gone, confiscated along with his dignity. He could only imagine the chaos that was unfolding outside as his friend Lisa, a fierce advocate for justice, tried to make sense of the situation. In the booking area, Officer Tom McCarthy stood with his colleagues, a smug smile plastered across his face. He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, basking in the attention of his peers. "You should have seen it," he boasted, his voice carrying a self-satisfied edge. "I caught the guy red-handed. Just another thug thinking he could get away with it. I'm cleaning up these streets one arrest at a time." "Good job, McCarthy," one of the officers replied, raising his coffee cup in a mock toast. "Keep up the good work. We need more guys like you." McCarthy's chest puffed out with pride, the camaraderie of his colleagues fueling his toxic bravado. He had always thrived on the power that came with the badge, and this time was no different. He had found his scapegoat, a man of color, an easy target to further his agenda of maintaining control. Meanwhile, Lisa was still at the cafe, her heart racing as she replayed the scene in her mind. She had known Marcus for years. He was not just a friend but a mentor, someone she respected deeply. She couldn't sit idly by while he was wrongfully accused. With her heart pounding, she started gathering evidence. She had recorded the arrest on her phone, and as she reviewed the footage, her stomach churned at the sight of McCarthy's aggressive demeanor. "Hey, did anyone see what just happened?" She called out to a group of bystanders who had gathered, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. One man stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, I saw it. That cop was out of line. Marcus was just talking to you. He didn't do anything wrong." "Exactly," Lisa exclaimed, her determination igniting. "We need to stick together and make sure this doesn't go unnoticed. Can you share your account with me? We have to show that this was a wrongful arrest." "Absolutely," he replied, his voice firm. "I'll help however I can." As more witnesses came forward to share their stories, Lisa felt a surge of hope. They exchanged contact information and agreed to meet later to piece together their testimonies. She knew they needed to act fast. The longer Marcus remained in custody, the more difficult it would be to prove his innocence. Inside the holding cell, Marcus paced back and forth, the weight of his situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. He could hear the sound of a clock ticking, each second stretching into an eternity. His thoughts drifted to his family, his career, and the sacrifices he had made for his country. How could this be happening to him? He had always believed in justice in the system, but now he felt abandoned by the very institutions he had dedicated his life to serve. "General Johnson?" A voice called out, breaking through his spiraling thoughts. A young officer stood at the door, clipboard in hand. "You're being processed now." Marcus straightened, attempting to regain his composure. "What charges are being pressed against me?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Resisting arrest, disturbing the peace," the officer replied, barely meeting his gaze. "You'll have a chance to speak with a lawyer soon." "Resisting arrest?" Marcus echoed incredulously. "I was just talking to my friend. I didn't resist anything." The officer shrugged, the indifference in his demeanor only deepening Marcus's frustration. "That's what they're saying. Just sit tight." As the officer walked away, Marcus felt a surge of anger. He clenched his jaw, pacing the small cell again. He needed to fight, not just for his freedom, but to expose the corruption that had led to this moment. He could feel the weight of injustice bearing down on him, and he knew he couldn't allow it to crush him. Hours trickled by, the chaos of the police station fading into a dull hum. Each moment spent behind bars felt like a betrayal. He was a soldier, a protector, not a criminal. He had to find a way out of this nightmare. Meanwhile, Lisa and the group of witnesses had gathered in a nearby park, their collective outrage transforming into a rallying cry. They stood in a circle, sharing their experiences, voices raised against the injustice they had witnessed. "Marcus is a hero, not a criminal," Lisa declared, her passion igniting a fire among the group. "We need to spread the word. This doesn't just affect him. It affects all of us." A woman from the crowd stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "What can we do? We can't let them get away with this. We need to make noise." "We'll organize a rally," Lisa suggested, her mind racing with possibilities. "We can gather the community, raise awareness, and demand justice for Marcus. We can't let his story be silenced." The group erupted in agreement, their determination palpable. They began to brainstorm ideas, crafting flyers, and planning their next steps. Lisa felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wouldn't stop until Marcus was vindicated. Back at the police station, Marcus finally had a moment to breathe as he was led into an interrogation room. The stark, sterile environment felt oppressive, the fluorescent lights glaring down on him like judgmental eyes. He sat at the metal table, his heart pounding in his chest as he awaited the arrival of his legal counsel. Minutes later, the door creaked open, and a lawyer entered, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "General Johnson, I'm here to help you," she said, taking a seat across from him. "I've been briefed on your situation, but I need to hear your side of the story." Marcus took a deep breath, his mind racing. "I was just at a cafe with a friend, and Officer McCarthy accused me of loitering. I tried to explain who I was, but he wouldn't listen. He arrested me without any reason." The lawyer nodded, jotting down notes. We need to gather evidence to counter the charges. Do you have any witnesses? Anyone who can corroborate your story? Lisa, Marcus said immediately, his mind flickering to his friend. She was there. She has video evidence. She was recording everything. Good, the lawyer replied, her expression turning serious. We'll reach out to her. We need to build a strong defense. This isn't just about you. It's about exposing the systemic issues within the police department. We can't let them silence you. As the hours dragged on, Marcus felt a sense of urgency building within him. He knew this battle was far from over, but he was ready to fight. The fight was no longer just about his freedom. It was about standing up against the injustice that had ensnared him. A fight for truth, a fight for justice, a fight for every individual who had been wronged. He looked his lawyer in the eye, determination igniting within him. I won't back down. I'm going to prove my innocence, and I'll make sure they pay for what they've done. With each word, a sense of hope began to blossom in his chest. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but he was ready to face whatever came next. Lisa felt a knot in her stomach as she approached the imposing structure of the army base. She had never been inside before, and the sheer scale of it made her feel small and insignificant. But today was different. She had a mission. Marcus Johnson, her friend, was wrongfully imprisoned, and she needed to do everything in her power to set things right. Clutching her phone tightly, she took a deep breath and stepped through the security checkpoint. Inside, the walls were plastered with military accolades and images of soldiers in action. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a sense of duty and honor that contrasted sharply with the injustice Marcus was facing. She made her way through the hallways, her mind racing with the urgency of her task. Finally, she arrived at General Stevens' office, her heart pounding as she knocked on the door. "Come in," a deep voice called from within. Lisa pushed the door open to find General Stevens seated behind a large desk, papers strewn about, and a look of concern etched on his face. He was a distinguished man, with silver hair and a commanding presence that demanded respect. As he looked up, his expression shifted from surprise to alarm. "Lisa, what brings you here?" he asked, standing up and motioning for her to sit. "I'm here about Marcus," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He's been arrested, and it's all a mistake. You have to help him." General Stevens' brow furrowed as he processed her words. "Arrested? What do you mean? I thought he was on leave." He was just at a cafe, having a coffee with me when Officer McCarthy showed up out of nowhere and arrested him. He made baseless accusations, and Marcus didn't do anything wrong." Lisa's voice grew stronger as she recounted the events. "I have evidence, General. I recorded the whole thing and there were witnesses. This is about more than just Marcus. It's about the systemic racism in the police force." Stevens' demeanor changed as the gravity of the situation sank in. He sat back down, his hands steepled in front of him. "This is serious, Lisa. If what you say is true, we need to act quickly. I'll contact the Army's legal team immediately." He grabbed his phone and began dialing, his expression focused and determined. As he spoke to the legal team, Lisa felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. General Stevens was a man of integrity, and if anyone could help Marcus, it was him. She watched him intently, absorbing the weight of his words and the urgency in his voice. "Thank you, General," she said when he hung up. "You don't know how much this means. Marcus is a good man. He deserves better than this." Stevens nodded solemnly. "I will make sure we launch a formal investigation. This kind of behavior from an officer is unacceptable, and it cannot go unpunished. We'll ensure that Marcus gets the justice he deserves." With a newfound sense of purpose, Lisa left the office, her heart racing. She had taken the first step in a long battle, but she was determined to see it through. As she stepped outside, the weight of the world seemed a little lighter. She needed to gather more evidence and support for Marcus's case. She had to show the community what was happening. Meanwhile, back at the police station, Officer Tom McCarthy sat at his desk, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Reports were coming in about the growing interest in Marcus's case, and McCarthy could feel the pressure mounting. His superiors were watching him, and the last thing he wanted was to be scrutinized for his actions. What a mess, he muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. I need to get ahead of this. With a grim determination, McCarthy began to fabricate evidence against Marcus. He recalled the details of the arrest, twisting them to fit a narrative that painted Marcus as a dangerous individual involved in gang activity. He typed furiously on his computer, creating false reports that would justify his actions. Yeah, that'll do it, he smirked, satisfied with his handiwork. No one will question me if I make it look like I was doing my job. He leaned back in his chair, confident that he could control the narrative and protect his reputation. As he continued to manipulate the facts, the door swung open, and Officer Jenna, his partner, stepped inside. She looked troubled, her brow furrowed. Tom, what's going on with the Johnson case? I've been hearing some disturbing things. Nothing to worry about, Jenna, McCarthy replied dismissively. I'm handling it. Handling it? You mean covering your tracks? This is serious, Tom. We can't just fabricate evidence. It's going to blow up in our faces, she warned, her voice laced with concern. Relax. I know what I'm doing, he snapped, irritation flaring. You just focus on your job and let me handle this. Trust me, it'll all work out. But Jenna couldn't shake her unease. What if someone finds out? What if the army gets involved? You know they won't let this slide. Let them come, McCarthy said, his bravado masking his growing anxiety. I'll take care of it. Just keep your head down and follow my lead. As the conversation continued, McCarthy felt the walls closing in on him. He could sense the scrutiny from both the public and his colleagues. The pressure was mounting, and he knew he had to act quickly to save himself. Back in the holding cell, Marcus sat on the cold metal bench, his mind racing. Hours had turned into an eternity, and he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. He had always prided himself on his resilience, but this situation tested every ounce of his strength. The injustice of it all left him feeling helpless and angry. Hey man, a voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to see a fellow inmate, Elijah, watching him from across the cell. You look like you've been through hell. I'm just trying to figure out how to get out of here, Marcus replied, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. I didn't do anything wrong, and yet here I am. Elijah nodded, his expression sympathetic. I know how you feel. I've been here before. The system isn't built for guys like us. You've got to stand firm, man. Don't let them break you. What do you mean? Marcus asked, intrigued. What happened to you? Elijah leaned forward, his voice low. I was wrongfully accused too. The same thing, racial profiling, made-up charges. Took me months to fight my way out. But I learned a lot along the way. You can't give up. You have to push back. Show them you won't be intimidated. Marcus listened intently, feeling a flicker of hope igniting within him. How did you get through it? By speaking up. By finding people who believed me. You need to gather your allies like that friend of yours. Don't let them silence you. They thrive on fear, but fear is a choice. You have to choose courage instead. Courage, Marcus repeated, the word resonating with him. I fought for my country. I should be able to fight for myself. Exactly, Elijah said, a fire igniting in his eyes. You've got to channel that fight. Use it to expose the truth. Don't let their lies become your reality. In that moment, something shifted within Marcus. The anger and frustration that had been consuming him transformed into determination. He would not let this injustice define him. He would fight back, not just for himself but for everyone who had been wronged by a system that was supposed to protect them. Thank you, man, Marcus said, feeling a newfound strength. I won't give up. I'll find a way to prove my innocence. Elijah smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. That's what I like to hear. You've got this. Just remember, you're not alone in this fight. As Marcus sat in the dimly lit cell, the weight of his circumstances began to feel a little lighter. The fight for justice was just beginning, and he was ready to take it on. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the streets, Lisa felt a surge of determination. The rally she had organized was set to take place in the heart of the community, a gathering that aimed to raise awareness of Marcus's wrongful arrest. She stood before a small crowd on the steps of the community center, her heart racing with anticipation. Banners waved, slogans were shouted, and the air buzzed with a sense of urgency and solidarity. "Together, we can make our voices heard," she shouted, her voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "We're here to stand up for Marcus Johnson, a man unjustly accused, a man who deserves justice. This isn't just about him. It's about all of us. It's about the systemic issues that plague our communities." The crowd erupted in cheers, their enthusiasm palpable. Lisa had spent long hours planning this event, reaching out to local activists and community leaders. News of Marcus's arrest had spread like wildfire, igniting a movement that went beyond the individual case. It was a call to action against the racism and corruption that had festered within the police force for too long. As she spoke, Lisa noticed the flashing lights of news vans pulling up, cameras rolling. Reporters emerged, eager to capture the energy and emotion of the crowd. She felt a surge of hope. The media attention could pressure the police department to reconsider their stance. The rally was more than just a protest. It was a beacon of hope, a chance for the community to unite. "Let's make sure everyone knows the truth," Lisa continued, her voice firm. "We will not be silenced. We will not allow our brothers and sisters to suffer in silence. We demand accountability." Among the crowd, people held signs that read "Justice for Marcus" and "End Racial Profiling Now." Children, elders, and everyone in between stood shoulder to shoulder, their diversity a vibrant tapestry woven together by a shared purpose. As the sun set, the streetlights flickered to life, illuminating the faces of those who had come to support Marcus. Meanwhile, in the dimly lit precinct of the police station, Officer Tom McCarthy sat at his desk, the weight of anxiety pressing down on him. The rally had reached his ears, and he could already feel the walls closing in around him. The growing movement against him and his fellow officers was palpable, and he had begun to act recklessly, making a series of mistakes that had caught the attention of internal affairs. "Did you see the news today?" his partner, Officer Jenna, asked as she entered the room, her brow furrowed with concern. "They're talking about the rally. It's all over social media." McCarthy clenched his jaw, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "Yeah, I saw. It's just a bunch of loudmouths trying to stir up trouble. They don't know what really goes on out there, but they're gathering evidence, Tom. People are speaking out and they have video footage of the arrest. We need to be careful," Jenna warned, her voice low but urgent. "Careful?" McCarthy scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "I'm not worried about them. What are they going to do? They don't have the power, we do. I'll handle this my way." But deep down, McCarthy felt a flicker of doubt. The rally had drawn attention to his past actions, and he was acutely aware of the scrutiny closing in on him. He couldn't afford to slip up, but the pressure to maintain his facade was becoming overwhelming. His thoughts raced as he considered his next move, unsure of how to navigate the tightening noose around his neck. Back at the rally, Lisa felt the momentum building. She had organized speakers to share their experiences with police misconduct, and as each person took the mic, their stories resonated deeply with the crowd. Voices rang out, echoing the frustrations and fears that had simmered beneath the surface for too long. "I was stopped for no reason," one young man said, his voice trembling with anger. "They treated me like a criminal just because of the color of my skin. This has to change." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, the unity palpable. Lisa's heart swelled with pride. This was what she had envisioned, a community coming together to demand change, to stand against injustice. As the rally continued, Lisa spotted a familiar figure in the crowd. General Stevens, Marcus's commanding officer, had arrived, his presence lending an air of authority to the gathering. She approached him, her heart racing with a mix of respect and gratitude. "General Stevens, thank you for being here," she said, her voice earnest. "Your support means the world to us. We need all the help we can get to bring justice for Marcus." General Stevens nodded, his expression serious. I'm here because I believe in Marcus, and I believe in this cause. We need to make sure everyone knows the truth about what happened. Lisa felt a surge of hope at his words. With the Army's legal team mobilizing to investigate the wrongful arrest, the community had allies that could make a significant difference. But she knew they had to keep the pressure on. The rally was only the beginning. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street, Lisa felt a renewed sense of purpose. The voices of her community echoed in her ears, fueling her resolve. They would not rest until Marcus was free and the corrupt practices of officers like McCarthy were exposed. Meanwhile, across town, McCarthy paced his apartment, his mind racing. The rally had been a wake-up call, and desperation clawed at him. He was no stranger to bending the rules to maintain control, but this time felt different. The stakes were higher, and he could feel the heat from internal affairs on his back. "Tom, you need to calm down," Jenna's voice echoed in his mind. "We can't be reckless." "Reckless?" He muttered to himself, frustration boiling over. "I'll show them what happens when they mess with me." With a sudden determination, he grabbed his phone and began to draft a message to his contacts, determined to shift the narrative in his favor. He would fabricate evidence, twist the truth, and ensure that Marcus would take the fall. The thought of losing everything he had built terrified him, and he would do anything to protect his position. Back at the rally, Lisa took a deep breath, her heart pounding with anticipation. She stepped up to the microphone again, ready to invigorate the crowd. "We have to keep fighting. This is just the beginning. Together, we can bring about real change. We can hold these officers accountable." The crowd roared in agreement, and Lisa knew that their voices were stronger together. They would not back down. They would fight for Marcus and for justice, no matter how challenging the road ahead. The movement had gained momentum, and with it, a glimmer of hope that change was possible. As the night wore on, the energy of the rally lingered in the air, a testament to the strength of a community united against injustice. And in the shadows, Tom McCarthy plotted his next move, unaware that the tide was turning against him. The walls were indeed closing in, and the fight for justice was just beginning. The day of Marcus's court hearing dawned heavy with anticipation, the sun filtering through the clouds as if even the weather sensed the weight of the moment. The courtroom was buzzing, packed with supporters who filled the benches, their expressions a mix of hope and anxiety. Friends, family, and activists stood shoulder to shoulder, united in their quest for justice. At the front, Marcus sat with his legal team, his heart thumping loudly against the backdrop of whispered conversations and the rustle of papers. He was dressed in a crisp suit, a stark contrast to the prison garb he had worn during his unjust confinement. As the judge entered, a hush fell over the room. Judge Ramirez, a stern woman known for her no-nonsense approach, took her seat and surveyed the crowd with an air of authority. "Court is in session," she announced, her voice firm. The tension in the air was palpable as she turned her gaze towards the prosecution, where Officer Tom McCarthy sat, a facade of confidence masking his growing unease. McCarthy had always prided himself on his ability to manipulate situations to his favor, but today felt different. The heat of the spotlight was intense, and he could sense the skepticism radiating from the gallery. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the silence as he rose to take the stand. The moment felt surreal for Marcus, who had seen McCarthy's aggression firsthand and was now watching him attempt to spin a tale of justification for his actions. "Officer McCarthy," the prosecutor began, his voice steady, "can you describe the events that led to the arrest of Marcus Johnson?" Yes," McCarthy stammered slightly, his bravado faltering. "I received a call about a suspicious individual loitering outside a cafe. When I arrived, I observed Mr. Johnson acting in a manner consistent with gang activity." A collective murmur erupted in the courtroom, eyebrows raised and heads shaking at his blatant fabrication. Marcus clenched his fists under the table, fighting back the anger that threatened to boil over. "Can you clarify what specifically you perceived as gang activity?" the prosecutor pressed, leaning in slightly. McCarthy hesitated, the facade cracking. He was He was conversing with a friend and they appeared to be engaged in a heated discussion. The weakness in his words did not go unnoticed. Is it standard procedure to arrest someone based on their appearance and a conversation? The prosecutor questioned, his tone pointed. No, but is it standard procedure to use excessive force during an arrest? The prosecutor interrupted, displaying the evidence of bruising on Marcus's arms from the handcuffs. McCarthy shifted uncomfortably, sweat forming on his brow. I had to ensure compliance. He was not cooperating. The prosecutor leaned forward, challenging him. What did Mr. Johnson say to you during this so-called non-compliance? He said he was a soldier, but I didn't believe him, McCarthy admitted, the words escaping his lips like a confession. I had my doubts. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. And those doubts were based on his race, correct? A ripple of discontent flowed through the gallery. McCarthy's face flushed, and he stuttered. I had to assess the situation as I saw fit. The judge interjected, her voice stern. Officer McCarthy, I would advise you to stick to the facts and refrain from conjecture based on assumptions. The court does not tolerate racial profiling. As McCarthy struggled to regain control of the narrative, a sense of unease settled over him. He could feel the eyes of the entire courtroom on him, and the weight of their judgment pressed down. It was then that Lisa stepped forward, clutching her phone tightly, her heart racing. She had captured the moment that would change everything. Your Honor, I have evidence that directly contradicts Officer McCarthy's testimony, Lisa announced, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Gasps echoed through the room as she approached the judge, her determination palpable. Judge Ramirez nodded, allowing her to present the video. As the footage began to play, silence enveloped the courtroom. The screen flickered to life, showing Marcus and his friend laughing and talking animatedly, completely at ease. Then, the scene shifted to McCarthy's arrival. The aggressive way he approached Marcus, the harshness in his voice, and the unjust application of force that followed. Gasps erupted as the onlookers witnessed the truth laid bare. The video shows that Officer McCarthy had no reason to suspect Mr. Johnson of any wrongdoing, Lisa said, her voice rising above the murmurs. This was not an arrest. It was an act of racial profiling. Judge Ramirez leaned forward, her expression hardening as she watched the footage with keen interest. The courtroom was silent, the audience captivated by the undeniable truth unfolding before them. McCarthy's face paled, the bravado slipping away as realization dawned on him that his lies were unraveling. Recess, the judge declared, her voice cutting through the tension. We will take a short break to review the evidence presented. As the gavel struck, a wave of whispers filled the room. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety. He turned to Lisa, gratitude flooding his expression. You did it. You really did it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We did it, she corrected, a smile breaking through her earlier tension. This is just the beginning, Marcus. We're going to show them the truth. As the courtroom emptied for the recess, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He glanced towards the back, where General Stevens stood, his presence a reassuring anchor amidst the chaos. The general caught Marcus's eye and nodded, a silent promise of support that fortified his resolve. In the hallway, hushed conversations erupted among the spectators, their voices a mixture of disbelief and outrage as they processed the evidence. Whispers of corruption within the police department began to circulate, igniting a fire of indignation among the community. People instinctively gathered, forming small groups, discussing the implications of what they had witnessed. Did you see the way he lied? One woman exclaimed, shaking her head. This isn't just about Marcus. It's about all of us. Another man chimed in, we need to hold them accountable. This is systemic. Exactly, a third voice called out. We have to make sure this doesn't happen again. We can't let them sweep this under the rug. Back in the courtroom, Marcus sat silently, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something much larger than his own personal fight. The whispers of corruption within the police force felt like a dam had been breached, revealing a torrent of injustices that had long been hidden. He pulled out his phone, glancing at the message from General Stevens that had come through during the commotion. "Marcus, I want you to know that we are fully committed to seeing this through. We won't rest until justice is served. Stay strong." Reassured by those words, Marcus felt the weight on his shoulders ease slightly. He was not alone in this fight, and the wheels of change were beginning to turn. As the recess continued, he prepared himself mentally for the next phase of the hearing. The echoes of the courtroom filled his thoughts, the realization that their battle was not just for him, but for everyone who had suffered under a system that too often turned a blind eye to injustice. This was a turning point, and he was determined to see it through to the end. As the courtroom settled back into a tense silence, the judge, a stern woman with sharp glasses perched on her nose, looked out over the sea of anxious faces. Marcus Johnson sat at the defendant's table, his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of hope and apprehension washing over him. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone was aware that the outcome of this hearing would resonate far beyond these four walls. "Mr. McCarthy," the judge began, her voice steady yet laced with an undercurrent of anger, "your actions and the evidence presented thus far are deeply troubling. It is clear that the integrity of this case has been compromised." She adjusted her glasses, scanning the courtroom with piercing eyes. "I expect an immediate explanation." McCarthy, who had been seated at the prosecution's table, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could utter a word, his partner, Officer Jenna Hayes, stood up. There was a resolute determination in her stance that caught everyone's attention. "Your Honor, if I may," Jenna said, her voice carrying a weight that demanded silence. The judge nodded curtly, allowing her to proceed. Jenna took a deep breath, her eyes darting briefly to Marcus before she continued. "I need to confess something. I can no longer be complicit in this." Gasps rippled through the courtroom, and murmurs erupted among the spectators. Marcus's heart raced as he exchanged glances with Lisa, who was seated among the supporters. This was unexpected, a twist in the narrative that could change everything. "Officer Hayes, please clarify your statement," the judge urged, her expression now one of intrigue mixed with skepticism. Jenna squared her shoulders, her voice gaining strength. "I have been part of a system that has enabled racial profiling, and I'm ashamed of my actions. Officer McCarthy has consistently fabricated evidence and targeted innocent individuals based solely on their race. I can no longer sit back and watch as he continues to destroy lives." The courtroom fell silent, the gravity of her words sinking in. McCarthy's face flushed with anger, and he shot her a warning glare. "You're making a mistake, Jenna," he hissed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Am I?" Jenna countered, her tone unwavering. "You've crossed a line, Tom. The evidence against Marcus is fabricated. I've seen the reports you've filed, the misleading testimonies you've given to justify your actions. This isn't just about him. It's about so many others who've suffered because of your reckless behavior." A ripple of disbelief coursed through the room. The judge leaned forward, her interest piqued. "Do you have any proof to support your claims, Officer Hayes?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jenna replied, pulling a folder from her briefcase. "I've gathered documentation and internal communications that outline the practices we followed. Practices that were not only unethical but illegal. I'm ready to testify to the truth." "Your Honor, this is outrageous," McCarthy shouted, his voice rising in panic. "This is nothing more than a desperate attempt to save a criminal." "Enough," the judge thundered, her gavel striking the desk with authority. "Officer Hayes, I will allow you to present your evidence. But let me remind you that this is a serious matter. Perjury and conspiracy to commit a crime are offenses that carry severe penalties." As Jenna began to lay out her evidence, Marcus felt a surge of hope. The pieces of a broken system were starting to align, and for the first time in days, he felt the weight of injustice begin to lift. Jenna presented screenshots of text messages exchanged between her and McCarthy, revealing discussions about how to manipulate the narrative of their arrests. She detailed instances where they had coerced witnesses into giving false statements, all under the guise of maintaining a clean image for the department. The courtroom was rapt, eyes glued to the unfolding drama. Your Honor, I can provide testimonies from other officers who were present during these incidents. They will confirm McCarthy's pattern of behavior, Jenna concluded, her voice steady despite the intensity of the moment. The judge nodded thoughtfully, her gaze shifting to McCarthy, who now appeared visibly shaken. Officer McCarthy, this is a serious accusation. How do you respond? McCarthy stammered, his bravado crumbling. This is a conspiracy. She's lying. We've always acted in the best interest of the community. Your actions say otherwise, the judge replied coolly. Given the overwhelming evidence of systemic corruption and racial profiling, I find it hard to accept your defense. The tension in the room was palpable as the judge leaned back in her chair, weighing the evidence before her. The community's collective breath held tight, waiting for a decision that would echo through their lives. Finally, the judge spoke, her voice steady and authoritative. In light of the presented evidence and the confession of Officer Hayes, I hereby dismiss all charges against General Marcus Johnson. This court recognizes the systemic failures that have led to this wrongful arrest. Relief washed over Marcus like a tidal wave. He could hardly believe what he had just heard. The courtroom erupted into cheers, a chorus of voices celebrating the triumph of justice over prejudice. Lisa jumped to her feet, tears streaming down her face as she hugged the people around her, their joy infectious. McCarthy, however, stood frozen, disbelief etched across his face. The judge's next words cut through the celebration like a knife. Officer McCarthy, you are hereby placed under arrest for your actions and the corruption you have perpetuated within the police department. As officers approached McCarthy to take him into custody, he shouted, "You'll regret this. I'm not the only one. They're all in on it." His voice was desperate, a last-ditch effort to cling to the crumbling remnants of his authority. Jenna, now standing resolute beside Marcus, turned to the judge. This isn't just about him. It's about reforming the entire system. We need accountability and transparency within the police force. The judge nodded, her expression softening as she acknowledged the truth in Jenna's words. You're right. This case has revealed deep-seated issues that require immediate attention. I will be recommending further investigation into the practices of this department. As McCarthy was led away, the community rallied around Marcus. Embraces and shouts of encouragement filled the air, a cacophony of voices celebrating his freedom. Marcus stood in the center of it all, the weight of injustice finally lifting. As he stepped outside, the sunlight felt warmer, more vibrant. He took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp air, and allowed himself a moment of gratitude. Thank you, he whispered to Lisa, who stood by his side, beaming. We did this together, she replied, her eyes shining with pride. This is just the beginning. We need to keep pushing for change. Marcus nodded, understanding the magnitude of their journey. I won't stop fighting, not just for myself, but for everyone who has suffered because of this system. We need to ensure that no one else has to go through what I did. As they walked away from the courthouse, the sounds of celebration faded into the distance, but the determination within Marcus burned brighter than ever. He was no longer just a victim. He was an advocate, ready to take on the challenges ahead. The fight for justice was far from over, but with each step, he felt the power of community behind him, ready to bring about the change that was so desperately needed. If you like the content, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and share it with your friends. Your comment is essential for the growth of the channel. And look at this video that appears on the screen. See you soon.